Oh, my glasses I haven't got them on.
Beth.
Paul, is Paul here?
No,
Paul's
Paul's not
okay.
here.
All right, so Beth's here, local land services support officer for Pest Animal Program. So perfectly set up. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks everyone for having me come along today. We actually had at Glen Davis next Friday a pest animal monitoring and baiting workshop organised, and we had Dr. Peter Fleming was going to come and talk. And the reason why we're getting Peter to come and have a chat in this area is to discuss the use of 1080 and to allay some people's concerns about 1080 and basically delivery and all the other questions that come around with baiting for feral animals. So considering that the duress and the stress that this community's been under for the last few months, we thought the timing might not be great. When I said that to Kerry, she said, no. She said, why don't you come on Sunday? So I very hurriedly put something together today. And but please, and I'll talk to Kerry about when the best time to run this, but my details are on the bottom, and I'll leave these flyers here for anyone that wants to think about coming to that, and we can change it to Glen Davis if you'd prefer than going to Glen Davis, but yeah, so that day is coming up, and it'll be a really informative day.
So it's still happening, something about
it can still happen, but yeah, just when we want to put it on, and probably when I can get Peter Fleming again. Yeah.
So he's not available now next Friday?
I don't know, he's on
so
leave.
So it is cancelled?
Yeah, I've cancelled it for Friday. Yeah. And I cancelled it for Friday very soon after New Year's, when things were pretty hot and things were still pretty volatile. And now I thought, maybe we should have had it, but sorry, that's done. So probably February might be a better time. So while we're here for bushfire recovery, I think it's important to note that feral animals are a key threatening process for just about every ecological community in Australia. So it's just as important prior to fires, and it's even more important now where we've got such a lot of vulnerable species. And I think every speaker today has touched on that issue, and Trent could have done my talk for me, so I could have been off the hook. Okay, so as we've said, food sources have been incinerated, habitat's been reduced or destroyed. We've probably got lots of yummy, small, furry critters congregating on the edge of burnt country, and they are easy pickings for just about every omnivore or carnivore, so cats, foxes, wild dogs and pigs. So, and obviously the herbivore species, deer and goats and pigs, will also have a pretty serious impact on our recovering vegetation communities as well. People that have been on the fire grounds have given us feedback that they're seeing large numbers of deer come out of the burnt country onto private property and into the forests, and the same with dogs, wild dogs. So probably the same with foxes and cats, but it's harder to spot them. So thank you. Okay, so we'll just pop through this. Thank you. So foxes are one of the biggest threats, and if we can just keep going. Yep, this one. I suggest this is not our big problem. I don't think foxes climbing trees at night to track down and eat koalas is our biggest problem. Probably foxes picking up any koala or any other arboreal animal that decides it needs to leave a burnout tree to get somewhere else is going to be really easy pickings. Just hang on a sec. Sorry. So as you can see, even spines aren't a great defence. There's not much a fox won't attack, yeah, so not a great result there for that little echidna. And they don't respect boundary fences of any nature, unless you've got a really good well designed, floppy top fence, very high. You're unlikely to keep foxes out. And cats, we all know about cats.
We've got more cats than usual in this patch because with the closing of the rubbish tip here at Glen Davis, the little colony there I think has spread down my end of the road.
Which is interesting because some of the councils have had a predator controller come in and do night shoots off of the tips recently. If you see that there is still a need, and I guess it comes back to community feedback. We need community feedback. We don't get a lot of feedback out of the Kapiti Valley. I'll be blunt about that in terms of participation in baiting, probably reporting in terms of our feral animals. So that's what I'm imploring for today. But there are cat management options. So fellow deer, really are, I think in a few years' time, the Central Tablelands region will be really grappling with feral deer. It's a massive problem. It's a massive problem for horticulture, grazing, but also for our local bush, and fire recovery will be really threatened for
Is that deer?
our vegetation. Yes, that's deer. Yep, rather than these trees. So they got a good reach. Yes.
I'm wondering, what I'm hearing in this area, especially with pigs, that people are deliberately releasing them into the bush, so they can go out and have fun shooting them.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I mean, surely some kind of monitoring system can be worked out, so the animals are tagged, something like, microchips. I mean, cats and dogs are
kill them.
Well, I think if you're going to go to the trouble of...
I don't know, but that seems outrageous to me that that people are getting away with that, and I don't know what can be done to stop it, but I think, like you're just saying, people are not reporting this stuff, and so it gets out of hand, and, just... I don't know whether some sort of tagging system of all, pigs are farm animals. They're supposed to be on farm properties and nowhere else.
So the problem's gone well beyond a domestic ownership issue. So obviously if we were to catch a feral deer, we'd do away with the feral deer rather than putting a tag in its ear. As with all domestic animals, including dogs and cats and livestock, they must be contained on their property. So, and it is illegal to move feral pigs, it's illegal to move feral deer. We've had, fallow are by far the most common deer species, but there's 6 in New South Wales, 6 different deer species. There is not an inch of New South Wales that they cannot they cannot use as habitat and live. Even right out to Broken Hill, all of that country, there are species that will live in every inch of New South Wales, they're predicting. So we've had incidences where neighbours have suggested that deer of different species have been brought in and released in sort of the Hargraves Hill End area, for example. So it does go on, and again, it's reporting, it's telling authorities if that's happened. But unless you catch them,
season for shooting?
no. So deer are now classified as a feral animal; they're no longer a game species. So yeah.
That's very recent.
Yeah, that's very recent.
So what does that mean?
That's September. That means in practice that you are allowed to shoot deer or give anyone else permission to shoot deer on your property without a licence.
Yeah, and you can harvest the meat?
Yes, do what you like. Can't sell it, but you can.
No.
Yeah, you can do what you like with it. So I'll just
Back to the pigs.
so a bit further back.
Further back?
Yep, one more. Yep. So when we get rain, or we're in the small areas where there is remaining water, this is a problem, and it's the same for pigs. So it's not just stripping vegetation; they can cause problems, and we all know what pigs do. Okay, so wild dogs, they can be a bit contentious, but there is a massive wild dog problem in the Central Tablelands. I'll just stop on this picture for a minute. So that's a joey getting taken along. I mean, we get reports from people about wild dogs when they chew 30 sheep and kill 30 sheep a night. But I would argue that they are causing a great deal of damage to native wildlife in this area. The picture's interesting, not just because he's carrying a joey, but where he's running. So dogs will take the path of least resistance. So if you want to set up cameras, and I'd really encourage anyone to do it, to know what's going on your property, set them up on a road, on a stock track, or a kangaroo track, gateways, anywhere where you think that's easy for a dog to trot along, because he's got soft paws and he doesn't want to damage them walking over rocks and sticks and prickles. So what have we got now in this whole area? All beautifully, freshly graded highways. So we have got dog highways everywhere, and we're getting a lot of information back from people that there is a lot of dog tracks on those highways, and there's a lot of dog movements. So just before the fire, the LLS put a camera line in along the edge of national parks and private country, so in and out. And because we have concern about wild dog numbers in this, what we call the Rolleston Pest Group area, but it's not just, we shouldn't classify it as that, but it's from here right up to Byalong Valley, sort of so basically right along the eastern side of this region. We put out 20 cameras and we may have seen 40 different dogs. That is a really frightening statistic, and how that is going to pan out in terms of livestock predation will be interesting, but I would imagine that there's a lot of skinny kangaroos getting absolutely hammered at the moment.
Dogs, are you talking wild dogs or including foxes or...
I guess, well, I'm talking, well, all carnivores are an issue, but yeah, I'm talking wild dogs. Yeah.
Are you putting cameras on private property as well as public, as well as national parks?
So for that example, that was part private, part national parks. We have a lot of landholders that put them up themselves so that they can see what's on their property. This one's very recent. This was only in early December. These poochers had this kangaroo, and I was really interested to read the. It's been cut off of this, but to read the time frame on the bottom of the cameras of the shots. This kangaroo, unless it was multiple kangaroos, was lapped, and there's a dam just down this side, and he was lapped in and out of that dam all day until they got him down. So it's not quick and pretty. It's not like David Attenborough films, but it's yeah. And then they got him in the end. But that was quite a large pack of dogs.
They exhaust them.
This is the most ferocious of all. No, I just wanted to put this one up there and the next one just to remind you. Sorry, I've forgotten. John spoke about it beautifully this morning. Please be aware of your domestic animals if you're coming into these areas, because yeah, for a number of reasons, their hunting instinct hasn't gone away. Just because they sit nicely on your couch doesn't mean they're not having an impact. So, where am I up to?
And get them muted so they don't try and breathe.
So I'll talk about cameras in a minute. I just wanted to talk about management options as well, and Trent touched on this. I have a fact sheet up there about aerial baiting. Aerial baiting is carried out by the LLS in conjunction with National Parks, hopefully twice a year. It'll be in the first week or 2 weeks of May. We did about 800 kilometres of aerial baiting last year right through the Central Tablelands. So as well as parks, we also bait properties where it's inaccessible properties where they can't get up into the heavily timbered rough terrain where you can't lay a bait by hand, and it's one of our most effective tools to protect not just the parks but also the private landholders. It's relatively cheap, and 1080 baiting is our cheapest form of control by far, by an absolute country mile. We map every property, that we keep a record of every property that 1080 baits. And I'd just like to start by saying that 1080 baiting is very heavily regulated in Australia and in New South Wales. Do not get on the internet to look up 1080 bait and go to New Zealand, because it's a completely different situation. If you want to bait on your property, you need to have done training and you get a card, and we provide that training and it's free. If you would like from today to be able to use 1080 bait on your property, then we will bring a course here, and we can have one right here whenever you would like it, and it's a free day, and then you get a card and you can bait on your property. And they give you all the training on how to bait safely and effectively.
Is there a choice in baiting?
There is a choice, and I'd suggest that most of this valley takes the choice not to bait. And
No, I mean of different types.
yeah. You can use pest ejectors, which are designed for dogs. They pull it off and they get a squirt of poison in the back of their throat. But 1080 is it's just in the delivery. Yeah. Yep.
When you're baiting for wild pigs and you're using the same sort of food source that kangaroos and other native animals might eat, how do you make sure that bait won't be taken by native animals?
It's all in the delivery, and there's a thing called LD50 testing. So a huge range of Australian native animals have been tested. So pigs and rabbits and foxes and dogs are all baited slightly differently. But for example, so we get I commonly get, it kills all my wedge-tail eagles. Wedge-tail eagles need to eat 5.5 dog baits or 10 fox baits to succumb to 1080. Now the trick is not eating them, it's finding them. So even in an aerial baiting program where they're not buried, so if you bait at home, they need to be baits need to be buried, but where they may fall on the surface, they would need to fly along and find 5 250 gram baits on the ground like that.
In a single season?
At once, like within
okay.
space
It's not
of a day.
It's not like one every year.
No, it's not cumulative.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
1080 breaks down really quickly, especially in water. So we get people that worry about aerial baiting, that the bait will fall in the water and poison our water source. It breaks down sort of almost immediately. So
if you're baiting dogs, you're using meat, is that the idea?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
There are commercial meat or commercial baits as well, called dog on and fox off, which are similar sort of thing. And with all the baiting, it's basically based on presentation. So I have got, at the end of this, I've got some papers there. People worry about quolls. Now I'd suggest if national parks are baiting, we don't need to worry too much about quolls being affected by fox and dog baits. Again, it's a presentation issue, it's a time of year issue, it's burying baits, and there is a mountain of research done behind quolls.
Can I
Yes.
speak to that?
Yes.
So we've actually done quite a bit of research, so back in the early 2000s, but also recently, where we've actually tracked individual quolls during baiting programs, and we've found no negative impact on spotted-tailed quoll populations.
You're saying they never eat it?
That's the thing, so they will consume, so what we do is we actually lace the baits with a non-toxic biomarker. So when an animal ingests that biomarker, it actually grows through their vibrissae, through their whiskers. So we trap the quolls, pluck a few whiskers, and then we can look under a microscope to see if they've ingested the bait. They've actually ingested baits and survived. So there could be some issues with our LD50 testing that happened back in the 90s, I think, that suggested that quolls were not that tolerant to 10E, but I think their tolerance is a lot higher than what those initial studies showed, because we've got small female quolls eating multiple baits, and you can see in the banding of the vibrissae if they've ingested separate baits, and we've got individual females surviving, reproducing. We've tracked them to their dens and set up cameras to monitor their young, and so there's no negative impact associated with 1080 baiting for spotted outfall populations. In fact, I would suggest there's a positive impact because we're getting rid of their main competitors and their main predators.
So my question specifically though was about wild pigs and the type of food that they eat and how we know. So it's the same sort of thing. So how do you make sure that that's not affecting kangaroo populations or
Yeah, again, because of the LDPG, like it takes kangaroos have even higher tolerance to 1080 than quolls do. So they would have to consume a lot of 1080 to actually have reimbursed in that.
And it's also if you do baiting correctly and you're pig baiting, you free feed. So you're free feeding out oats for a number of nights. You camera monitor and monitor the amount of oats that are left each day. And you do that for 3 consecutive nights or over a period of time, so that when you do put out your grain bait, you're not leaving excessive bait material on the ground and then you bury it. Best practice, if it's adhered to, there's just very few issues.
You put out, and then you've got a camera monitoring to see what's actually feeding from there. So before you place it for 1080, you're actually seeing what's eating.
So you want to get as many of the pigs in the environment coming out and getting onto those grain trails first. What you don't want to do is go in there, blasé, throw some bait out, and only the first 5 pigs that come across eat the lot, and you think, oh right, I've taken out the pig population. Then next night there's 50 pigs back there. So it's also it should be pointed out that's very much the case with trapping. If you put pig traps out, make sure you put a camera on them, because there's countless great footage of pigs that are caught in a trap, and you think, yay, success, I've got pigs. And then you look at the camera images and there's 15 pigs still on the outside because the trap is so full that they can't get in there. So camera monitoring, it just gives us so much information and so much, you can be so much more effective with monitoring, and it's really interesting just to have it on your own place.
So you cover all that in the course you're talking about?
Yep. So feral scan, I really wanted to touch on this briefly. That would be another part of that day that we were suggesting for next week, which will be later in February, is that Peter West, who is one of the main men behind feral scan, will come out and he will have a chat to you about how it works. But it's a really great resource. So it does all of those species there. Interestingly, it's set up a little bit different for deer and feral pigs, because landholders don't want their properties earmarked as, I'm finding 50 deer here every second night, because it may bring in unwanted attention from hunters. So, and there's different layers of information that can be kept on feral scan and different layers of public access. So for me, if I want to do fox baiting on my property, I can actually mark on there every single bait that I put out. And for a great group baiting exercise, it's really quite helpful, because if 2 neighbours are baiting next to each other, instead of them both running baits, 10 metres apart up, well, it's not because of there's boundary issues, but, along the same line, we can soon see where there's gaps in the environment. So I've left some information about how you put it on your phones and your computers and cards there if you'd like some more information. Just go to the next one. So we use it widely in the Central Tablelands for wild dogs. Again, yep. So all those little dots there, the orange and red ones, are wild dog sightings in the Central Tablelands for the last 12 months.
That's the one I did.
In fact, hey. Now, I would suggest to you that Glen Davis does have dogs, and I would suggest to you that they have got as many dogs as Hargraves Hill End. Now, the reason why we've got so many dogs in Hargraves Hill End is that we've got an excellent pest group secretary, and she hammers her community, and they give her, when animals have been spotted, when they've had maulings, when they've shot a dog, or if they've come across a carcass, it all goes in, and that actually is an underrepresentation, because I would suggest that most of that Hargraves Hill End country, so I'm talking here, they're part of a private group where only if you're a member of the group you get to see what's happening. So you can do that if you want to have a community group here that does community baiting. You don't have to let the world know, but that is seriously about the amount of reports that we are getting from this country. So we also we produce maps for our pest groups to show where baiting is happening right across the region. And in the Hargraves Hillend area where you have high stock losses, most of this is coloured in from people that bait.
So the grey ones, is that baiting? Are they
Grey
baits?
ones are dead sheep. Mauled
Dead
sheep.
sheep,
Yeah.
right.
And so one dot might be 40 sheep.
So one little thing you said at the beginning of that was that they have a secretary that's doing this, not just pushing people, but it sounds
Helping.
like that person may be entering it.
Sometimes, yes.
Because I'm a
Yep.
bit of a tech head, so I'll play with the new
Hey?
app. But
Beauty.
not everybody is, and it might be
That's
better
right,
if
that's right.
if we start just getting
Yep.
people to
Yep.
tell me when they see
Yep.
wild dogs or kill a wild cat, which I know of down the road.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's
and
great.
start-
And it's
centralise,
resource.
it's taking the tech layer away from people.
Yeah.
If you bait, does it draw them into the bait?
oh,
Or are we baiting for what's already there?
so the issue with baiting is that you need about 70% of the country within a dog's range baited for it to encounter a bait. So, and a fox is, I'm not sure what a fox is, but if you take one fox out, you'll just create a vacuum and the foxes keep coming in. Which is why we, as much as we love any individual that wants to assist in the baiting effort, and you are against beautiful park country, and like Trent said, the biggest protection that you can give to any of these animals is to take out carnivores, and the lack of wild dog baiting would be also reflect in the amount of foxes you'd have in this area, because in country that's heavily baited, you just don't get the fox numbers.
I'm just worried, like, I've got dogs, so
Yep.
if they're baiting in the national park, are my dogs going to be drawn to that?
Only if you let them cross your boundary. So, that's obviously an issue under the, but no, they can't smell it from k's away.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah.
Excuse me, are there dingoes that might be affected?
I have got another presentation that talks about percentages of dingoes and dogs, but there are, suffice to say that there's a lot of DNA testing, and this eastern side of the country, there's very few, there's very high incidence of wild dog or domestic dog DNA in what we call wild dogs. So there's what you think is a purebred dingo, and it doesn't matter what he looks like, because you can get a yellow dog that could be 80% domestic background with 20% wild dog. So it's really hard to blur the line. And I guess Trent's why right in the middle of the national parks aren't baited. That's not. It's the peripheral edges that are baited to protect. And it's not just a protection of livestock, but obviously also native species. But it's also need to think about the social aspect as well. I've had a lady or a fellow on the phone say around Candos that he said, he'd never heard of the adolescent. I rang him about aerial baiting, and he said, yeah, I think I've got a lot of dogs. And he said, they're coming up on my camera, they're pulling kangaroos down on my lawn. And one came up to my wife while she was putting the washing out, and she nearly patted it, and I was like, oh my goodness. So until someone gets injured, it's probably not a problem. And I said, do you hear howling at night? And she said, yes. And she said, my neighbour said I shouldn't go outside by myself at night. You've got a wild dog problem. So, yeah, we're talking packs of sometimes 13 have been seen in this area. So, and they're good hunters. Sorry, Trent, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to elaborate on the wild dog dingo thing. Functionally, they're the same.
Yeah.
Like, they behave the same. Like, ecologically, they form a similar role. Except the ones on the edge are the ones damaging livestock and becoming this problem. So with our baiting program for the rock wallaby, population, what we do is we bait the two valleys, but then when the valleys join the Colo, we stop baiting. So hopefully the dingo populations in the middle of Wollemi are conserved, and that's, you know.
So you sort of have to take up some of the dingoes to do it initially, possibly. Yeah,
100%,
yeah.
And I won't. Peter Fleming is certainly the man to talk to about that.
Yeah, for sure.
He's great. He'll give you lots of information.
Yeah,
He's
I
Mr.
encourage
Dingo.
everyone to come to that day
Yeah,
we run.
Sorry, did the LLS ever help with notification requirements, such as when there's a big community effort? Because I did the course and I was all keen to do it just on my property.
Yep.
And then I looked, I just was unlucky the way my property's situated. The amount of properties I would have to notify, some of them have their entrances round the other part, Jenolan Road, wherever, way away from my property. I just looked at the admin requirements and thought, no.
Well, I guess you've got to balance that against against the benefit.
Yeah.
There's ways of doing that, and it comes down to the Excellent Privacy Act. We've got everybody's details, but we're not allowed. If you want to bait, we can't give you who your neighbours are, unfortunately. Even though it is our number one impediment to people baiting.
That's
So
what I
they
was
have
so
to
keen,
notify.
and then I thought,
But you know what? You only have to do it once. Like you do it once. You get your list together. You can get on 6 maps.
How do you get the list together?
So get on 6 maps, and press
I will
on
search
all
it.
your put a 1 kilometre radius around your property, and click on every little patch around it, and it'll give you the holding address for all of those properties, and you can post it to them.
Good. If you click on it, it'll give you.
Yes,
so
it'll give you the
Not the name or phone numbers.
not the name,
not
but
name
the
or phone
address, the
numbers.
one that I can send a
that
letter
will give you
to.
the address. Yep.
Okay.
I didn't tell you that. That's how you do it.
It sounds like this thing with Peter Fleming is going to be good for people who may have concerns about it from an
Yes,
economic
that
point of
was
view, as
my
well
angle.
as much as people who might be considering it. Yeah.
Definitely.
Because it'd be good for people to know what their neighbours are doing and the
Yep.
kind of controls around that.
It is not a. It's not a push. It's not a. It's not a day to push you into baiting. It's a day to come and say, I've got concerns about 1080. Can you please discuss this with me? Yeah. I'd like him to push baiting, but that's maybe I'll be there too. Cameras. So it's not all just about dogs. You can pick up all your pest species in your cameras. And the next one, just click that again. We've missed a. Beautiful, isn't it? Which is our number one problem with deer management, is that they're beautiful. But that's the same camera. Look at the background, and look at the dates on it. The 1st of the 11th, 13th of the 1st, 11th of the 1st, 13th of the 1st, 14th of the 1st.
I love that little patch.
So, what a cracking little spot. So you can imagine what sort of impact that is having on that little local environment there. Yep. So my message. So this is some of those. Sorry, but that's some of those things about quolls. Trent covered that beautifully, so I won't go there. This media release came out this week, and I guess the take-home message is, if you want to do something for the native species, go and kill a few ferals.
What about domestic cats?
And domestic cats, kill them too. Call the LLS. I've left Christy Bennett's, she's the biosecurity officer for this area, and I've left her card on the corner of the table. Or you can get onto me through Ev. But please call the LLS, and if you want to do something as a group, excellent, but if you want to do something as an individual, that's a great start. Fantastic.
So the other thing, just finally, the other thing is that in this area there's also a fair problem with feral goats, because they weren't mentioned, but I do see that quite a lot, and I've seen what sort of damage they can do as well.
Yeah. Yep, so goats and deer are a bit tricky because goats aren't tricky at the moment because they're worth $8.50 at the abattoir live. Sorry, that's per kilogram. So they're worth more than sheep at the moment.
Wow.
So that's why goats are probably less of an issue at the moment. You can muster goats, but deer and goats are generally, not generally, you can't poison them, they're only shooting. Yep. So there's options that the LLS can help you with, not just baiting but also trapping. There's contractors we can put you in touch with. So if you've got a small block that's difficult to bait, there are contractors that have infrared night vision technology that you can get in. And that's unrestrained domestic dog. Yeah, so there are different options. It's not just baiting, it's very effective and it's the cheapest, but there are other options, especially if you've got orchid-sized blocks and other issues where it's difficult.
Can I just ask one quick? I was just thinking, just in relation to people sharing stuff on Facebook and how much stuff there is being shared, is it possible that you guys could share something that is really useful, especially for people that want to do something, especially like reporting, a link to where you can report sightings of feral animals?
Yeah, on the Central Tablelands LLS Facebook site. That's we commonly put posts on there.
Yeah, because a lot of people are looking for something to do.
Yeah, I'll share, but it'll be overwhelming if I share too much from today on Facebook.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
No, I'm just talking about that one specific link to report where feral animals are seen.
Well, it's on.
Well, it's that app. You can just download that app.
Yeah,
so just
share that app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
for
It's
those
amazing.
that might have missed it, so Julie, we might have a way of actually just trying to coordinate some of that data coming through. So that's just on the to-do list, and I think a really good outcome from this discussion.
Yeah.
Would be
But
continued.
knowing what the app is would be great.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you so much, Bethany.